Hey,
Hi, how you
how are you?
doing?
Good, how are
Good.
you?
Look at this. We had to wait till we were different countries and connect on Skype, but
I
here we
know.
are. That's okay.
Yep.
I, while I was at MVU, I bumped into a bunch of people that actually have schools in India, and I've already been working with schools over here as an education consultant, but specifically on how to bring EQ into the schools. But so you can run a program for the kids, and you definitely need to have a program for the teachers. But the parent component is the part that I felt needed. Like everything I think is still at this point still like a paradigm shift, because right now I wouldn't say that EQ has hit a tipping point in school systems. Yeah.
Yep.
However, the parenting part of it, I think, is huge because, and we can get into this when we talk, but I can't see how the future of education doesn't bring in the parents. Yeah. So this is something like I just recently wrote up some proposals for some schools that I think are doing some pretty cool things in India, and it's something that I'd like to have more of a presence. So it's and the way I'm going to be going about it is creating video content as well, but specifically geared towards the parents, because if they're not upskilling, then you have a child that's building all these really rich, amazing skill sets, assuming that the school has embraced it by upskilling their teachers and it's part of their philosophy and their vision and their value fundamentally, and then how they create the culture that brings in the parent.
Right.
And so I have some ideas on that, and I guess that'll just keep expanding as I run into new and different ways of doing that. Right now, I have what I think is a way in order to bring the parents in. I think also the recognition that tends to come from, and as you rightfully say, parents are doing their best based on the tools that they have. It's not about, no parent is drumming their fingers saying, how do I thwart my child? They're ready to give their lungs and liver for their child. However, they're out of tools because a lot of times parents are coming from a scarcity mindset about, I want my child to be able to be successful, and that means that they can afford their life and afford maybe all the things that I had to struggle for even in my life. So when you said when you mentioned parents wanting their kids to be doctors and lawyers and engineers and accountants and these things that traditionally made more money, there's, I think the part that may be helpful for them to recognize is that in those particular roles, which are changing dramatically. Let's face it, as a lawyer, nowadays, even the role of lawyer is changing, because if I wanted a divorce, I can go online and download a divorce. I don't have to even get a lawyer to do that. If I wanted to do my taxes, I can go to TurboTax and pay $39.99, get my taxes done. So not only, and why do you think things like homeopathy and naturopathy even are proliferating, right? It's because they don't want a doctor that says, tell me where it hurts. They want a doctor that says, tell me about your life. But when they start recognizing that socio-emotional skills, or EQ, is really going to allow their kids in a global marketplace to have an advantage, we know that the studies are already out, that if you take NASA rocket scientists, they've done studies, all of them, let's put them at the same level of brilliance. Okay, they're NASA rocket scientists. But who actually ends up having the leadership roles? Who ends up having are more likable and have the opportunity to move into the positions that they want? They've already correlated that back to EQ. Google, you might have read the article in the Washington Post. They crunched 22 years of data. Google, who's notorious for hiring the best of the best in IT and tech, right? And what did it come up with? It came up with the people that actually moved to the roles that they wanted to and got all the opportunities were the people that had what I call the hard skills, which is the ability to relate, the leadership skills, all these things. So when they looked at they actually ran the algorithm based on the HR data. That to me is profound for parents that are thinking, how does my child really have the edge over the other one, right?
Beautiful.
That's really what they're thinking.
Yeah.
So this to me is, this I don't think has to be a hard sell. It's just that they haven't created the connection yet, because maybe they haven't been exposed to that information that's out there that allows them to kind of piece together. No one just wants a doctor. This is what's being valued right now in this world. Like, we know, you and I both know, I use a Mac, right? My husband hates Macs. He likes Microsoft products.
Yeah.
However, Mac has cornered the market on design and sleek, and in a world of abundance, this is what our minds are gravitating towards, right?
Yeah.
So in a world of abundance, in a world that people can choose the red toaster with silver dials, it still toasts the bread, but they can choose that. Then the type of grooming that we have educationally and where we put our mind, I think, has its basis in EQ and CQ, which is creative intelligence and emotional intelligence. And which is why, if I had to choose, I think that's way more important than any of that. And I can, you know, I think the artists are going to be sitting around the boardroom table just as soon as the people that have a PhD.
In an age where the technology is changing so rapidly and there's an overload of choices a kid can choose to learn, specifically at a grade level where the parents oversee their kids' learning, how does one decide what's the best for their kid? There are many coaching institutes that parents want their kids to join after school or in summer break. Is there a universal skill that the parents can focus on building into their kids that no matter how fast the world is changing can be useful?
Absolutely. And I think that universal skill is EQ, or emotional intelligence. And the reason why I say that is because the role that the parent plays in the child and setting the foundation for the child's brain is huge. So we know that from 0 to 5, we are essentially laying down the neural network based on the 1,000,001 myriad of interactions that the parent is having with that child. We're setting down the entire neural landscape, or the superhighway, if you will, in a child's mind. Yeah, this is the foundation. The mind is being primed for every other learning that comes next. And so emotional intelligence fundamentally is our ability to become self-aware. Yeah. So what are we feeling? Why are we feeling it? How do we move through a feeling? How do we calm ourselves when we get stuck in our feelings, our loneliness, or sadness, or despair? All rich, vibrant expressions that every child and every human has, because a human being is actually a human feeling. And then also the ability to take perspectives. There's additional things like motivation and social savvy. But the reason why I feel that this is so fundamental to every child and every opportunity that lies in front of that child is, depending on how that experience happens in that very, what I call like a window of opportunity of life, determines if that child, how it, whether they see the world as safe, whether they feel the world is abundant, all the stories and meanings, so many of their bias and blind spots gets formulated even prelingual, before the child can even speak. Yeah, this is intrinsically part of their almost intrinsic memory, if you will, that they store, and now affects how they see the world, right? Now, we're living in a world that is global. I mean, it's getting smaller all the time. There's so much technology and so much abundance. And in this world of abundance, what are the skill sets that really you can't automate? Yeah. What are the skill sets that that really allow us to connect with others? Because and really, in order to connect with others, it requires some really savvy skills. It requires the ability to read the conversations that are happening under the conversation, and understanding what I might even be bringing to that space, which is part of my own self-awareness, which is part of intuiting what's actually happening, and all the things I can't even see that I have to read into. Yeah. And then being able to respond appropriately. So I believe that a focus and a fundamental development of these skill sets, which is sourced from how well a parent attunes to their child, which we can get into, I'm sure we will, attunes to their child, is really how we start laying that neural network and how we start building those skills from a very young age.
So 0 to 5, you say is the window of life where the highways are built in the mind. So what kind of activities, like practically, I really want like practically, can be implemented by parents in that age group that would help foster that?
So the fundamental activity, which starts from childbirth and continues on, is the ability to read in, or what I call, they call attachment parenting, or attunement to your child. So this is reading the subtle cues of your child and being responsive to them. Yeah, it's recognizing whether we're running stories about, oh, we shouldn't pick up the child because then the child's really trying to manipulate you. It is actually gauging all the nuances, all the subtleties in connection, and being responsive to that. Yeah. And then there are moments where your child will be in pain, where they fall and scrape their knee, where they're trying to build up a toy, blocks, and they start falling down, and the child is met with their frustration or their sadness or their loneliness. And the parent, using their very observant skill sets and in using their very finely tuned intuition, is now helping that child create a narrative by using storytelling, or to help their child understand the feelings that they're feeling, and without putting the parent's own perceptions or feelings on the situation. So for example, if the child encountered frustration, the parent can say, oh, I see that you were trying to build your blocks, and are you feeling frustrated? Yeah, that they fell down. And maybe telling a story with their child about a moment that they felt frustrated or they felt sad. By bringing this together, by naming feelings, by exploring this labyrinth of emotion this child is encountering just on its own, and then later on even more in a more complex way with other individuals, the parent is guiding the child. They're holding them step by step through the awareness, acknowledgement, processing of that feeling, and also the perspective that comes with that. Because part of engaging with humans are to not only recognize that, I exist in the context of somebody else, right? Mm-hmm. So now, how can I use almost this as an act of imagination, climb into somebody else's mind and try and understand, what are you feeling right now? What does that facial expression mean? This was a game that my parents played at a very early age with us. I think that's why we're all coaches. And that's, anywhere we went, it could be a park, it could be out for an ice cream, it could be a coffee shop where we're having a drink. He would ask us, what do you think that person's feeling over there? Well, why do you think that child is crying? And what would happen is that we'd come up with an idea, and then we'd come up with another idea, and he'd keep pushing us to come up with many ideas. And it ingrained within us not to get attached to any one truth, and also to read the fine subtleties of human interaction and behavior and facial expressions, right? So a parent can help guide children from a very young age. They can use stories, they can use their tone, their touch, because what the child wants to feel in this moment is, as they navigate the world, and the parent is pointing out, oh, you're feeling angry, or oh, this is soft, or oh, this feels, I feel tired. Then the child gets a chance to understand themselves in the context of the parent, right? So the most important skill set that the parent can do is to, first of all, attune to their child, but to build their own self-awareness, to question themselves constantly about the whys. Why did I just say this? Why did I just do this? What was I thinking? And go not just one layer superficially down, but 3 layers or 4 or more down the rabbit hole of self-discovery. And then you get to the really interesting ideas of what might be governing your behavior. Right. And if you're willing to do that, which is what I think is extraordinary work, then you now can begin what I think is one of the reasons why the children have come here in the first place, which is for you to undergo your own transformation in the context of your child. And by doing so, your child gets to watch you as you show up as your highest self with admiration and go, oh, I want to emulate and I want to model that. And so that's why, the parent sometimes wants the child to be, what after school activity can I put them in, and what will give them the edge? And I say that if you want your child to be curious, if you want your child to be engaged, if you want your child to be cutting edge, start with yourself. Start thinking about, you can't expect a child to go up on stage and dance with all the characters, all the kiddie characters on stage, if you yourself would never find yourself on the stage, right? So you have to now transform every bit of fear and shame and worry that you have and anxiety about getting on the stage and go, my children are watching. they're watching me every second, and let that be the impetus for you to go and do your thing.
Yeah.
Because your children are always watching.
Be the role model.
Yes. Be the role model. I mean, I think many parents recognize that they need to be the role model. I mean, I think many parents may recognize that, okay, if I smoke, then that's not setting a good sign. Yeah. Even though there's still parents that may be smoking in front of their kids and telling their kids not to smoke.
Right.
However, I don't know if parents are aware that they're wanting something for their child that they're not wanting for themselves, or triumphing for themselves in their own life. Mm. They may not be aware that in their desire to show up as confident and unafraid, to go, you're at the party, go make friends, go up on stage and dance with the characters, that they themselves would not do it. So that's where moments where you ask yourself, would I do that? Can I do that? How do I lead? Maybe not in this context, but in many other contexts, so the child can see me and then go, oh, because usually, I mean, from my experience, and I've been coaching for a long time, many times when children aren't showing up as confident, if the parent really explores that, there are areas in their own life where they themselves aren't feeling confident or brave. And that's okay. But now it's an opportunity to do something.
Well, so in case the parents miss this window of 0 to 5, do you still believe that the skills can be taught later on in life? Let's say their parents were watching this and they're like, shit, I missed the window. Now what do I do with my kid?
Okay, so absolutely. We know the brain is plastic. We know the brain can change itself. What I say is, the difference is, though, is simply giving your child a hill to climb versus a mountain. So the earlier we can get to this, the better. But bearing in mind, I mean, if you've missed this particular window, for me, I've actually extended the window from 5 to 12. I've noticed that while that child between 0 to 12 is there's something quite interesting that happens from my experience at 13. There's a belief, certainly in the West, that once your child becomes a teenager, that you lose them to the world. Yeah. Oh, they don't follow me anymore. And actually, and if you look at the work of Dr. Gabor Mate, who's done a lot of research in this area and wrote an amazing book called How to Hold On to Your Kids, he talks about how that's actually a fallacy that we've invented in the West, and that there are cultures out there, cultures that are deep in the forests of Papua New Guinea and different cultures around the world, that at the teenage years, the child has not left to the parents. Yeah. They are still have the listening of the parents while still maintaining their own autonomy and their own ideas. Yeah. And so what that means is that if you want to stay the biggest influence on your child while still maintaining your child's sense of autonomy and allowing their own ideas to foster, the way you do that is by I would say from up until 12 years old, really ensuring that you're trying your best to connect constantly with the child and ask for feedback from the child ask for feedback, so that you can get a window into whatever blind spots that might be showing up in the relationship dynamic.
Feedback about
right? So this is a question that I've asked my children since they were 4, and I've asked them every single day of my life, and I encourage clients to, and that's I ask them, is there anything that mommy can do so that she can love you in the way you want to be loved? Is there anything that I missed today? Yeah. And I ask that question because in a day of all the loving that I try and do, I don't know where it landed. I don't know if it landed in a way that they even absorbed the love. Or maybe there was nothing that I did in my hanging out with them all day, but still didn't show my presence because I actually wasn't present, but I was present, but not showing presence. So in that moment, it's an opportunity now to excavate whatever is happening for that child, whatever wounding. But in order to do that, I have to create a safe space. I have to because the child always wants to preserve you. This is very important. The child always wants to preserve the parent as the god and the goddess in their life. They're on a pedestal. Yeah. So they don't want to do anything that upsets that dynamic. So therefore, if I want to get honest feedback, I need to make sure that I create the space as the parent, the safest space possible, such that I can encourage my child to give that feedback. And I can do that by sharing stories. even sharing stories about how I felt about my own parents, who I thought were amazing and awesome and loving, and even moments where I felt hurt and saddened and I had a paper cut in my heart, or I wish mommy and daddy had done this. We may be in a toggle because we're thinking to speak those words is to alienate the parent or to hurt the parent or to wound the parent. But we have to actually trust that the parent is big enough to be able to handle this and to recognize that I'm not trying to, that doesn't take them off their platform. That's what it makes them human. Yeah. So asking for feedback from your kids, but I also ask this question, and that is, how did you feel loved by mommy? Because I also want to single out in their own mind that there were moments, not just that I might have missed the mark, but there were moments I did make the mark, right? So that I still get to walk out of the room with my shoulders squared, but I can recognize, oh, I mean, how else do we grow? Everything that's in our unconscious is in our unconscious. So the only way to ever get an access to that is to go to the people around us that we trust and love and ask for feedback. I would encourage, that's the best question you can ask any friend, any partner, anyone that's around you. You can take it with a grain of salt. You don't have to believe everything. But to ask them, it's because people are dying to be asked that question. Because in a feedback culture where we have defensiveness on overdrive, this now gives them the opportunity. So for parents that are listening to this, I would encourage you to ask your children for feedback. And when they say, everything's great, Mom, because this is another important piece, and that is, from my experience, how much your child tells you is a direct and tumbles out everything, all the paper cuts in their heart, is in a direct correlation to how safe that child feels with you. Yeah. So if your child is always saying nothing, everything's great, then I think that's a clue that they don't feel safe enough.
Right.
So if they're telling you a lot of little bits and pieces about what could have been done better, or where they felt hurt, or where they felt marginalized, or where they felt shame, or where they felt whatever it was they felt, then know that you're in the right direction. See that as a victory, as opposed to an ego, a threat to your ego.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think if the kid is always like, no, nothing, everything is great, at some point in future, the kid is going to like break out of it and start talking back to the parents. Probably, I don't know, but like talking back, sometimes like parents take it as, stop disrespecting me. You don't look at the other kid. He doesn't disrespect his parents. He follows every single thing that the parents tell him or her to do. You always want to talk back to your parents. You have no manners. You don't respect. But do you think it's like an indication of a cry of that inner child that, no, you're not really looking at what makes me happy versus what you think makes me happy?
Okay, so that's coming from fear, and that's generally a pattern that has been established. Because one thing that's really interesting in parenting that you come to see after coaching is that when a parent, every parent hopefully is doing incrementally better than their own parents. Yeah, that's the natural way of the world. Right. That's meant to happen. But if the parent, okay, so let's say my parent, if they didn't have somebody who attuned to their needs, a parent who listened to their hurts, who wanted to hear what they might have contributed to it, who asked questions, and to wanting to understand everything that's going on in their heart and mind, it is going to be tremendously difficult for the parent to do it for their child. For this reason, though, what they don't realize is unconsciously, this is what's happening. I didn't get it, therefore you're not going to get it. Now, that seems very insidious, right? That seems like, but the thing is, this is all happening unconsciously. So it just shows up in a myriad of ways where the parent now, until they go back into their own life to find out where in their life how did they feel? It's very even difficult to create the change by just explaining that to a parent. They have to go back to their own childhood, recognize those moments at 5, 8, and 10 where they wanted mom and dad to do something. Like maybe they wanted, more hugs, or they wanted a parent to listen to them. And then you ask them as you guide them back to this really sacred space while they were a child. And as they recall all the all the details, and you ask them, what do you wish mommy or daddy had done? And then you tend to get a very infantile response. Oh, I wish they had hugged me. I wish they had brought me close. I wish they had stroked my hair. I wish this is the tone they would have spoken to me. All these beautiful bits and pieces. Yeah. And at that moment, that's when they can get the aha moment, right? Because when they recognize this is what I needed. And the truth is, mommy and daddy probably may not be able to do that for you. So this now becomes the act of reparenting yourself. So now you have to go to your child and all the stories that you made up and all the meanings that you made up in that context to go, who am I to disrespect? Who am I to not listen? I must not be important enough. My autonomy, I shouldn't listen to my own mind. I shouldn't listen to my own inner voice. I'm going to shut that down to listen to my parents, which the parent, again, is not doing this consciously. Yeah. Then the child, the parent, going back to their inner child, can get that epiphany, that aha moment, right? And in that moment, they can now relate to what the child might feel. Yeah. So this is not a left brain activity. This is a right brain activity. Yeah. And it helps when you have somebody guiding you back to that. But, that is one way to really, when they say understanding the why makes the what stick. So understanding where it came from can help you bring more consciousness around it. But also, I kind of lost my thought there. It'll come back to me.
Yeah. I heard this somewhere that the current generation of parents were saying that when we were kids, we didn't have the guts to tell what we need to our parents, and now that we are parents, our kids have guts to tell us what they want to do. So they feel powerless in their entire life, basically, because when they were kids, they didn't have the power to talk back to their parents. And now that the kids are more self-aware that they can choose what they want to do, they don't really follow what their parents want them to do. So I felt like it's a funny thing. It was a funny interview, but
it's going to create even more clash. Because now it's the audacity. It's the audacity that my child is asserting their needs, right?
Exactly. Right.
When I never could assert my need. Forever they're mute. Right. So what happens is now they resort to bribes and punishment and threats. And but at some point, you're out. You don't have any more things to offer. You don't have anything more to take away. And therein is why rewards and punishment never work. Right. The way that you get a child to listen. Whenever a parent comes to me and says, my child doesn't listen, the first thing I know that they need to do is build the listening. Listening is a function, build the rapport. Listening is a function of rapport. So if the rapport isn't there, the child will not be guided. They will be very peer-oriented and go to whoever they feel their needs are best met by, or whoever they feel understood by. And if that's not the parent, because the parent is going like this and is not taking a moment to be a student, then they're going to lose the listening, and then everything's going to fall from there. So one of the, huge reasons why if you want to be an influence, especially with friends that might be fickle and love you one day and don't love you the next, then that is one of the reasons why building the rapport is so crucial. Not to mention, let's face it, we really don't want mini-me's. We think we do. But right. Do we really want a child that just says yes their whole life? At what point does a child... the reason why no is the favorite word of a 2- and 3-year-old is because it's the first time a child has a sense of autonomy, a sense of I'm separate from you. Now, if a child was a yes to everything, at what point in time do we go, does that child have any beliefs, thoughts, feelings of their own? Can they really grasp into all that creativity and opportunity their mind holds if they're being held back by a mind that's saying, don't think what I think, believe what I feel. So we have to be very wary as parents what we are putting out there, because we may be thwarting our child's emotional learning and certainly their creative learning and their own sense of self. Because at the end of the day, and I'll just say this, we're here for a blink of an eye. We know this. It's like we're a speck of dust on a speck of dust in the whole space-time continuum. And so, even from the Harvard longitudinal longest study that's ever been done on humans, being able to establish relationship, which I like to put it this way, who we are in the dark at 2 o'clock in the morning, how we feel about our life. We can't fake that on Facebook, right? We could try, we could write a post on Facebook to try and present this image, but who we are in the dark to ourselves, whether we go, I love my life, or whether we feel stuck in the trenches of our loneliness or depression or unhappiness or whatever, all really big feelings, all normal feelings that everyone should have. But how stuck we get is a function of how, our own EQ. So I think it's tremendously important for us to start cultivating that, and for parents to recognize that we don't want mini-me's. We really don't. We want children who have the audacity to go, I have the confidence to create a life I love. And it may not come in the form of doctor or lawyer or engineer. Yeah. Beautiful. And trust in me that I can be successful at it. Yeah.
Great. So now we know that these are the skills really important for a kid to learn, which will make them successful later on. One thing I've seen the parents are interested in is having a solid report card or a proof that their child is making some progress. So one of the things their parents like their kids to go to coaching classes, even though the classes teach them the same thing that they're going to learn at school, but just because the kids can get better grades at school, their parents want the kid to join the classes who train them in getting good grades, not just at school, but maybe at standardized tests. So they can have, at the end of the day, they can have a report card that says, oh, my kid is successful. He or she got A+. What does the report card look like in a social emotional learning environment? How does a parent?
It's anecdotal. It's description through the lens of a watchful eye. Watching something for A, B's, and C's is based in a parent's ego. Yeah. So the benchmark in social emotional learning is what is the experience of the teacher or the parent around the child, about the child being able to express on how they handle conflict, on how they make decisions, on how apt they are to put their hand up and conquer their own fears. All of these things that hold children back, how well they can integrate not just their feelings, but integrate with other people in new situations. All of these things are very situational and behavioral. So it's just like when you go to an interview. In an interview, I don't think they're asking you, maybe if you go for a specialist medical degree or a job, but what mark did you get in computer science or mathematics? What generally they're trying to gauge when they're hiring you is to do with behavioral. Those are generally the most interesting questions, and the questions that really decide. I mean, what really has people decide even to hire somebody? It's how they feel more than anything. They can't even pinpoint. They decided probably in a few minutes whether this person is right for the job. Unless it's a completely left brain job that doesn't involve. But even then, given two people, both equally academic, both equally with good marks, who are they going to choose? The one that they just feel good around, the one they feel is likable, the one they feel is communicative, the one that feels confident. So those skill sets play a huge role even amongst when you're being interviewed with the best of the best, because why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you optimize for somebody that's completely well-rounded? So in social emotional learning, I don't know how you do it unless, for example, you can make an assessment. You can make an assessment as to whether, personally, I wouldn't give it a mark, but I would say I could speak to whether or not a child is, how well they can process their feelings after they've been guided on how to do that. Yeah. But often I'll tell you something else that I think is tremendously interesting. And that is, even the idea of processing their feelings implies that the child can go and calm themselves, where studies even show that the way human minds were designed was not to self-regulate, but to co-regulate, meaning the parent, so see the parent as a spinning planet, and the parent's orbit affects the orbit of the child. So even if you have a child in a tantrum and the parent comes in with their spinning planet, their job is to really self-regulate themselves, such that the child, so if the child can't find their shoes and the parent gets all caught up, my child can't find their shoes, or I can't find their homework, then the parent's planet's going to spin like this. But the role of the parent is to go, what is my emotional state right now, such that I can create the best, most beautiful, calm orbit, such that the child who's spinning now begins to slow down. That is co-regulation.
Mm.
When you go out with your friend and you have a tea and they're telling you about they just lost their job or their wife is sick or they just lost their mother, what are they doing as they're drinking the tea? Through eye contact, tone, or touch. It's a co-regulation that's happening.
Mm.
So really, I would even argue that there's not always somebody around, so it's important to learn how to self-regulate so you're not by yourself and you spin out. But in the context of the school system or where you're around people, the sheer recognition that this is how us humans, us social creatures, were meant to connect and regulate each other's nervous systems, yeah, is by in the context of somebody else. So now you have finally savvy teachers and savvy parents and savvy admins of schools that are able to support the child in that experience.
Yeah. Beautiful. I know I can ask you 1,000 different questions on this topic, but I really want to be respectful of your time and want to conclude with one final question. And that actually
Sure.
gets really well with what you just said. How does a parent interact with kids' teachers? Or how does the teacher or a school as a whole interact with the kids' parents to ensure a whole child development? What is the conversation they need to have to be able to better understand the kids' learning styles, and so that they can design more of that at school or even after school at home or somewhere else?
Well, I think that, first of all, the parents need to pull away from simply some sort of arbitrary number or academical gauge as to how the child's doing. When I go to my kids' school, and my children have gone through everything. They've been mostly in private, they've been homeschooled, and I've tried them out in a public school. And the only question that I'm mostly interested in understanding is the social aspect and the emotional aspect. I want to know how they move. What is the experience of them in the classroom and in the context of other people? Why are those interesting questions? Because those questions have you get a pulse. I mean, everything else could be learned. I mean, especially if we really want to talk about it. I mean, we're moving into a future where you probably can walk into your house and Alexa can tell you how much 5 times 5 is. Not that I'm advocating. I'm still a believer in learning multiplication, probably by rote. Okay. But I feel that those type of questions are the type of questions that parents should be asking, because then the parent can get a gauge. Is this child feeling confident? Are they feeling stuck? I mean, what holds us back in our life from seizing opportunities, from doing the things we want to do, if not inner stories and meanings and fears that we have, right? Yeah. So you could have the most brilliant child, but if they're too afraid to go for an interview or too afraid to seize an opportunity that might exist and say, choose me, then it doesn't matter what their marks are. And this is who they're competing with, if we really want to have it come down to that. So I don't like to put it in the context of competition, but I know that many parents are thinking about how does my child get the edge? And I think having the parent ask those questions about how are they developing, are there conflicts that happen in the class socially? How are they engaging with other people? Are there times that, is there anything that they can work on at home? And I would have the child be present for those conversations. Oh, okay. And that the teacher and the parent has been carefully guided on how to handle those conversations in the context. Because then both parents who have built these wonderful skills now can address it with the child there, for the child to walk away feeling inspired and motivated. Yeah, that's the goal. Yep. So I wouldn't use this is where everyone comes together as a unit and interacts with the child. For the teachers, I think that they also have an immense amount of pressure and stress to address and believe me, I mean, I'm not advocating at this point, while I can be a great advocate for unschooling, where you just let your child do whatever they want, and I can make a case for that as well after reading some wonderful books and getting some anecdotal evidence from people that have done that. But I think that the teachers have an immense amount of pressure in the academic that they lose sight of the experience the child has with them. Yeah, and because let's face it, the reason why how many teachers can you even recall as standing out as extraordinary in your life? 2, maybe 3?
Less than 5 for sure.
Right. And look how many teachers we've had. So what that means is that chances are, if we were to look back and go, who are those 2 or 3 teachers that stood out like a beacon? They saw something in us. They connected to us. And therefore, in the context of that, we wanted to learn. We wanted to show up. We were motivated. We were inspired. So what people are dying to be is to be seen. And when you have a preoccupation with that, then the child, they may learn. I mean, you can stuff something in a child's head, but I think, why not be greedy? Why not have it all? Why not have a child that's doing really well and loves their life? Why not have a child that's doing really well and is pursuing what they really want? And we all know that if they're pursuing what they really want and they're good at it, that the chances of them being successful has increased. So I don't think you necessarily have to not say academics are important. However, where would we be if, I don't know, like think of the top comedians or brilliant minds in a particular avenue, if we had just allowed them to really build, somebody had seen them for whatever gifts and abilities that they had and allowed them to flourish. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, you did. You actually reminded me of a story I heard somewhere. Do you know this guy called Gary Vaynerchuk?
Oh, yeah.
He's this marketing guy. So he was telling this one story that when he was a kid in school, he was horrible at grades. But what he used to do was he used to sell pencils and baseball cards and all this kind of stuff to the other kids, and they used to buy it from him. And when there was parents teachers or the parent students meeting, the parents used to tell their kids like, hey, don't hang out with this Gary guy. He's not your ideal friend. He's bad at grades. He's not gonna do good. And Gary was like, don't you realize that one day I'm gonna build something that your kid is gonna work for me? I'm gonna hire your kid who's doing really good at grades, and because I have the audacity to go out in the world and make things happen, whereas you're training your kid to just follow someone else's dream. And so that was really powerful. That reminded me of what you were just saying.
Amazing. Yeah. It's a really beautiful experience to be able to really do a deep dive into what allows us to flourish and what allows us to come alive and connect with others. I'm personally fascinated by that.
Yeah.
So, and you are too. So.
Okay. Yep. And the interesting thing is it's really personalized. We can't have like a one size fit all approach to this. It's really dependent on how the kid is, who the kid is, how the parents were raised. So one-on-one thing is really important. Although these kind of talks give them a general direction in which they can lead these conversations, but again, it's really specific to the environment at home.
Yeah.
And,
I agree.
I think I really want to stay in touch with you and pick your brain a little bit more later on in future when I build my own school and after school club. Because I'm really passionate about bringing the best of the practices across the globe that would suit the kind of audience that I have. And in that case, you really need to know the audience that I have to better be able to guide me in helping me build like a.
Well, actually, one of the things I started early this year in 2018 was we're the first to do this in Canada, and that is to offer an EQ club, just like you might have Lego club or computer science club, really an EQ club, which I beta tested with many different age groups. And I'll tell you, when you had 10 and 11-year-olds together and were able to create the space that amongst like 10 of them to explore all the power dynamics, all the things I don't even think their parents knew. I don't even think they knew actually what was coming up and coming to bear and causing conflicts or sadness or marginalization. And so this was a 8-week course that was designed just simply to get an insight into their feelings and the feelings of others, even what they might be doing that's creating disconnect with other people. So I feel really excited about that because this is the type of thing that I'd like to see more of. Right now it's something that people are like perking up about, but I think that when they realize that EQ can be taught in a fun, engaging, connected, just as fun as Lego Club, and the kids will be grateful for the type of connections that they're cultivating. I think that they're going to feel really great about the lives that they're living in, you know. So
Perfect.
yeah, keep going. I love it. We'll stay in touch for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to use this video as my guide for writing the next post for the ad search. I'm curious, how did you come across my first article?
Because when you said EdSurge, I Googled EdSurge, and then your article was there on the front page. So I read it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I'll let you know when the second article is up. And do you mind, or do you want me to put your contact or like reference
I'd love that.
in this whole interview?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, so I can like end it by saying, like, if you're interested in this more, please visit. What do I tell them?
Well, so the way I refer to myself is I call myself an EQ specialist and conscious parenting coach. And my website is www.buildgreatminds.com.
Perfect. Yeah. So I will mention that, and I'll let you know when it's out.
Thanks. Good. I'm excited to read it. And thank you so much. And yeah, I really would like to talk to you again. I mean, who knows? There's so many different ideas that I have. And right now, India's on my mind. And who knows? Maybe there's some collaboration at some point that we can do as well.
Perfect.
All right. You take care of yourself.
You too. Talk to you later.
Okay. All righty. Bye-bye.